Drug tests are an extremely common, policy-mandated practice carried out in practically every sport you could think of. The tests are a common enough part of these athletes' everyday lives that they don't even seem important enough to mention. That is unless something like this happens. However, one NFL player has managed to trip without tripping on those law-breaking boundaries. Here's everything you need to know about why Aaron Rodgers' ayahuasca use doesn't violate NFL's drug policy. First things first, why are we even discussing this? Well, last week, Aaron Rodgers revealed something intensely personal about himself, something that garnered widespread attention and not in a positive way. We're sure you can predict where we're going with this, but the famous quarterback for the Packers caused quite a stir a few days ago when he openly admitted to taking ayahuasca in both 2020 and 2021. Before we get into details, the brief description of ayahuasca is that it's a potent psychedelic native to South America, where it's used for religious, ritualistic, or medicinal purposes. So understandably, when an athlete for his stature reveals that they've been taking psychedelics before both of their MVP-winning seasons in 2020 and 2021, an audience is quite shocked. On Aubrey Marcus' podcast, to be specific, is when Rodgers discussed his ayahuasca retreat to Peru in 2020, before the third of his 4 MVP seasons. The thing here, though, is that after the revelation, which was made fairly casually given how strict drug policies can be in NFL, many were curious about whether his boldness would end up being negatively sanctioned, so to speak. Some were adamant about him possibly getting suspended for his confession about drug use. But before we get into what happened, let's take a small look at what the drug policy looks like. Okay, so, in more recent years, NFL has relaxed a lot of its policies regarding exactly what they test for in drug tests, and one of the big changes they've made in the last few years has been marijuana related. Because of its recreational and healing properties, a lot of players actually prefer them to other pain alleviating but addictive alternatives, like opioids or prescription drugs. And as of right now, any performance enhancing substances listed on the NFLPA website are banned. Big time. That makes perfect sense, of course, given that football's a very physical game. Having any sort of unnatural physical advantage would be decidedly unfair to the rest of the players. But obviously, there are a few complications and contradictions within that argument as well. All that said, how does Aaron Rodgers and his use of ayahuasca come into play here? Did he even get suspended for his admission? Interestingly enough, ayahuasca is a Schedule I drug under federal law, but doesn't fall under the NFL's banned substances like cannabis. So, as it turns out, no, he wasn't apprehended or given a warning. He wasn't even looked at twice after the open confession by the NFLer. What, are hallucinogenic drinks not somehow considered drugs anymore? Well, apparently there's a reason for the lack of big reaction from the NFL community. Turns out Brian McCarthy, a spokesman for the NFL, actually addressed the situation. According to him, Rodgers won't catch the eye of the league, since the ayahuasca wouldn't trigger a positive test result on either the substance abuse or the performance-enhancing substances policy that are the current NFLPA standard. The comment was reported by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and it seems like he's not the only one who isn't super concerned. The coach for Green Bay Packers, Matt LaFleur, was even asked about the incident on Monday and whether he was concerned about the league disciplining Rodgers. He simply responded by saying that he just hadn't given much thought to it at all. And well, if such big-name people actively involved within the workings of the league just don't care about the usage of ayahuasca, well then, there seems to be no reason for the general public to get too worked up over it, we suppose. Let's talk about a few more details from Rodgers' ayahuasca journey. On the podcast, Rodgers seemed to be a picture of relaxation, talking about his retreat to Peru giving him a deep and meaningful appreciation of life. He also added that he knew he wasn't going to be the same when he came back, which is pretty typical for many people who've been on a spiritual journey. On his ayahuasca journey, however, Rodgers had a few more details to share. He told Peter King from NBC Sports about the process, which apparently involved him sitting 3 different nights with the psychedelic. Rodgers' initial intent was actually to do a lot of healing of other relationships, also bring in certain people to have conversations with them. According to him, most of the work, though, came from around himself and his love for himself, unconditional to be precise, and what that looks like for him. And he claimed that in falling in love with himself unconditionally, he was allowed the understanding of how to love others the same way. The secret is to start with yourself, said Rodgers. He adds that he had to be a little more gentle with himself, and that includes showing himself compassion and forgiveness, since he has had some negative voices aid his negative self-talk for a while now. So it seems as though the drug usage had a more spiritual reason than performance enhancing. You could even say that the only performance that was enhanced was of his soul. perhaps. In other related news, Frank Gore, former NFL running back, was just charged in an alleged domestic violence incident. If you are in any way a fan of the NFL, you'd know who Frank Gore is. The third all-time leading rusher and former running back were charged with simple assault in connection with a case of an alleged domestic violence incident at Atlantic City, New Jersey hotel. This was an account given by the city's police department on Tuesday. On July 31, officers were sent to Tropicana, Atlantic City in response to a report involving a domestic violence incident, and the alleged victim was a 28-year-old woman from Miami who spoke with the hotel security. She apparently did not exhibit any signs of injury and decided not to file complaints at the time. Of course, an investigation followed, and Gore was charged. Gore, who is now 39, has been scheduled to show up in Atlantic City Municipal Court on October 17 and has not commented on the matter. What happened after? He ended up signing a one-day contract in June with the San Francisco 49ers to retire as a member of the team, which planned to induct him into the Edward J. DiBartolo Sr. 49ers Hall of Fame. Gore has not just played for the 49ers, though. He has been a part of the Dolphins, Jets, and the Colts in a career that spanned over 16 years, from 2005 to 2020. In all that time, he gained 16,000 yards with 81 touchdowns and added 3,985 receiving yards and 18 touchdown receptions. The last we saw of him was in 2020 in the NFL, and since then, Gore's turned to boxing. He even managed to lose his first fight to former NBA star Darren Williams in a split decision that year. Later, he also knocked out Yaya Olaronsola in May, his second fight, and he's not the only person from the NFL to have faced charges. Marshawn Lynch, another NFL running back who was notorious for bringing in his beast mode in the backfield of the Seattle Seahawks, has managed to get himself arrested in Las Vegas just before 7:30 a.m. this Tuesday. His charges were thankfully less severe. He was apprehended for driving under the influence, according to Las Vegas police. He was transported by the LVMPD to the Las Vegas City Jail, according to the official Twitter account for the city of Las Vegas. He has failed to surrender proof of security and was apparently driving an unregistered vehicle and even failed to drive in the travel lane, according to the Las Vegas Municipal Court online records. Lynch is a five-time Pro Bowler and has rushed for 10,413 yards and 85 touchdowns from 2007 to 2019 with the Seahawks, the Buffalo Bills, and the Oakland Raiders. And interestingly enough, this won't be the first time he's been arrested for driving under the influence. Back in 2012, he was brought in for similar charges, but pleaded down to the lesser charge of reckless driving, and the case was eventually resolved back in 2014. For someone who has made being laid back a big part of his otherwise entertaining personality, these charges don't reflect well on his image. In fact, back when he made an appearance on ESPN's Manningcast during last year's Seahawks New Orleans Saints game on Monday Night Football with Peyton and Eli Manning, he said that he'd prepared for his appearance by having a few shots of Hennessy. And that is all for this video. What do you think about Rodgers being able to get away with his ayahuasca trip? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to leave a like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications by pressing the bell icon to get notified every time we post a new video. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.